The night was cold and the broken lights of the spaceport flickered weakly. A human man named Daniel walked slowly through the empty streets, his hands holding a small bag of food. He looked like any other worker coming back from a long day, but his eyes were sharp and he always noticed what others ignored. That night he noticed movement in the corner, near the broken cargo containers. At first, he thought it was only shadows, but then he saw them, an alien woman and a small girl. Sitting close together, trying to stay warm, the woman's arms were wrapped tightly around the child, her eyes watching the darkness with fear. Her clothes were torn, her face pale, and her daughter looked thinner than she should. Daniel stopped walking, his heart heavy. He had heard rumors about refugees hiding near the port, but now he saw it with his own eyes. The mother looked at him sharply, like a wild animal ready to run. The little girl pressed her face into her mother's chest, hiding from him. He stood still for a moment, then slowly placed the bag of food on the ground near them. Without a word, he stepped back, keeping his hands visible so they would not think he was a threat. The alien mother narrowed her eyes, suspicion clear in every movement. She pulled her daughter closer and said something in her own language, sharp and protective. Daniel didn't understand the words, but he understood the meaning. She was telling him to leave, to stay away. He gave a small nod and walked off, leaving the food behind. That night, the woman did not touch the bag, but when hunger grew too strong, the little girl whispered to her mother, pointing to it with desperate eyes. The next morning, when Daniel passed by the same corner, the bag was gone. He smiled quietly to himself and carried another one. Again, he left it near the same spot and walked away. He did not look back, but he knew they would take it. This routine began to repeat. Every evening he would bring food, sometimes fruit, sometimes bread, sometimes a warm meal wrapped carefully. The woman never thanked him, never spoke to him, but her daughter began to peek from behind her mother's arm whenever Daniel appeared. One night, the little girl's big eyes met his. She did not smile, but she did not hide either. For Daniel, that was enough. It meant they were beginning to trust him little by little. Still, the mother's fear never faded. She always watched him with suspicion. Every time she took the bag, she checked it carefully, breaking the bread, sniffing the fruit. She was certain humans would never help, her kind without reason. And maybe she was right. Most humans in that city would have ignored her or worse, but Daniel was different. He remembered the war, the chaos, and the way innocent people always suffered the most. He saw the same pain in this mother's tired eyes, and he could not turn away even if it meant risking his own safety. One evening, the rain fell hard, flooding the streets with dirty water. Daniel arrived late, carrying food wrapped in plastic to keep it dry. The alien mother and daughter were huddled under a broken roof, shivering. Daniel placed the food near them again. This time, the little girl suddenly ran forward, grabbing it before her mother could stop her. The woman gasped and pulled her back quickly, scolding her in their tongue. But it was too late. Daniel had seen the hunger in the child's eyes. He did not move closer, but he smiled gently at the girl. The mother froze, watching him carefully. For the first time, she did not hide the food. She opened the bag slowly, still cautious, but she let her daughter eat. Daniel walked away as always, but his chest felt lighter. He knew the wall between them was starting to break. The next few days were the same. He would leave food. They would take it. The girl started to look healthier, her cheeks less hollow, her steps less weak. Sometimes she even dared to wave shyly when she thought her mother wasn't watching, but Daniel never stayed long enough to talk. He didn't want to scare them. He wanted them to feel safe, even if it took weeks. And in the back of his mind, he wondered who they were, where they came from, and why no one else seemed to care. The ruined spaceport held many secrets, but for Daniel, this was the most important one. A fragile bond was forming, born from kindness, fear, and hunger. He didn't know where it would lead, but deep inside, he felt that meeting them was no accident. It was the beginning of something that could change all their lives. The next evening, Daniel walked the same path again. The streets were busy with workers heading home, but nobody noticed him carrying the small bag in his hand. Nobody cared what he was doing. And that was good. The less attention, the better. When he reached the broken cargo containers, he saw them again. The alien mother sat with her daughter, her sharp eyes following every shadow. The little girl's face lit up when she saw the man with the bag. She tugged at her mother's sleeve. Whispering something softly, Daniel placed the bag down. Just as he always did, he did not say a word, did not make a sound. He only set it near them and stepped back. The girl's small hands reached out eagerly, but her mother caught her wrist, shaking her head. The woman still did not trust him, yet hunger was stronger than fear. After a long silence, she finally allowed her daughter to take the food. The child opened the bag with a smile, biting into the bread as if it was the most precious treasure in the world. Daniel saw the relief in her eyes, and it filled him with quiet satisfaction. He left without waiting, letting them eat in peace. Day after day, the same ritual continued. He would bring food, place it down, and leave. Sometimes it was fruit. Sometimes warm soup carried in a container. Sometimes pieces of cooked meat. Every time, the little girl ate quickly, while her mother inspected every bite first. She never stopped checking, never stopped suspecting. But slowly something began to change. The girl's face grew brighter, her movements more playful, and she started to look for him. Even before he arrived, one evening when Daniel came late, she was already waiting at the corner, her eyes scanning the street. When she saw him, she smiled shyly and waved. Daniel paused, surprised. The mother pulled her back quickly, glaring at him with warning in her eyes. But even she could not hide the truth. Their lives now depended on this man who gave without asking. That night, Daniel did something different. Instead of leaving quickly, he crouched down and gently pushed the bag closer. He pointed at the food, then at the girl, and gave a small nod. He still did not speak, but his actions carried meaning. The girl giggled softly, and the sound was like music in the cold night. For the first time, the mother did not look at him like an enemy. Her expression softened for only a second, but it was enough. Daniel walked away, carrying that memory with him. The wall of mistrust was starting to crack. In the following days, the little girl grew braver. She no longer hid behind her mother every time he appeared. Sometimes she would wave, sometimes she would peek from the corner. Once, when Daniel placed the bag down, she ran forward and said a word in her alien tongue. He did not understand, but he knew it was her way of saying thank you. The mother silenced her quickly, pulling her close, but Daniel caught the meaning in her bright eyes. The city, however, was not blind forever. Other workers noticed the human man carrying food every night. Some whispered that he was feeding animals. Others thought he was wasting his money. Nobody guessed the truth, but rumors had a way of growing. Daniel ignored them, but deep inside he knew danger was close. One evening, as he was placing the food, two men walked by and stopped. They laughed, pointing at him. "What are you doing here?" "Every night, Daniel?" one of them asked. Daniel stayed calm, pretending not to hear. He left quickly, heart heavy. He did not want anyone to know. If people discovered the alien mother and daughter, they would be taken away. Or worse. The next day, Daniel changed. His path taking longer routes, hiding the food under his coat. He made sure no one followed him. When he finally reached the corner, the little girl was waiting again. She looked worried, her mother's arms holding her tightly. Daniel placed the bag and gave her a small, reassuring nod. She smiled again, as if the world was safe for just a moment. That smile became the only reward he needed. He did not care about danger, about whispers, about rules. He only cared that the mother and child survived another day. The bond between them grew quietly. The girl began to hum little songs when she ate, her laughter echoing in the night. Her mother, though still cautious, no longer glared at him with anger. Instead, she watched him with tired eyes, as if trying to understand. Why would a human help them? Why did he keep coming back? Daniel himself did not know the answer. Maybe it was pity, maybe it was duty, or maybe it was something deeper. But every evening, when he walked through the ruined streets with a bag of food in his hand, he felt a strange sense of purpose, as if fate itself had tied him to the lives of this alien mother and daughter, and though none of them spoke the same words, their silence was filled with meaning. Every bag left behind was a message. Every smile from the little girl was a reply. And slowly, step by step, their worlds began to connect. The nights grew colder, and Daniel kept coming with his bag of food. By now, the little girl no longer hid her face. She would wait for him, her bright eyes glowing with quiet joy whenever she saw him. But the mother still watched him carefully, her eyes sharp, her body tense like a shield. Daniel did not mind. He knew trust was not something given easily. It had to be earned, and he was willing to wait. Still, a question kept circling in his mind. Who were they? And why were they hiding here? One night, when the streets were quieter than usual, Daniel noticed something. The woman's hands were trembling as she accepted the bag. Her shoulders shook, not from cold, but from pain deep inside. The little girl was trying to cheer her, but her mother's face was carved with sorrow. Daniel crouched down, keeping a safe distance. He pointed gently at the girl, then at the woman, then at his own chest. It was not words, but a question. Why are you here? The mother stared at him, her lips tight, her eyes stormy. For a long time she said nothing, but then, as the wind howled through the broken spaceport, she spoke. Her words were strange, her language unfamiliar. Yet Daniel could catch small pieces, broken phrases mixed with human words. War, dead, hunted, no home. She placed her hand on her daughter's head, pulling her close. Her eyes filled with tears that she tried to hide. Her voice shook as she said, "Husband. Gone. Soldiers. No safe place." Daniel understood enough. Her husband had died in the war, leaving her alone with the child. She was a widow, running from soldiers who saw her kind as enemies. Daniel's heart grew heavy. He had fought in the same war. He had seen the cruelty, the way innocent families were crushed between battles. Now here she was, one of the forgotten, struggling to survive in silence. The mother looked at him sharply again, as if warning him not to pity her. Her pride was strong even in her weakness. She clutched her daughter tightly, as if the little girl was her only reason to live. Daniel lowered his eyes, giving her respect. He did not say anything, but inside something changed. He no longer saw them as strangers. He saw them as a family broken by war. The little girl tugged at her mother's sleeve and whispered something. Her mother hesitated, then nodded slightly. The girl reached into the bag Daniel had brought and pulled out a piece of bread. She walked forward, her small feet splashing in the puddles. With trembling hands, she offered the bread back to him. Daniel shook his head, gently refusing, but she insisted, her eyes wide and shining. It was her way of saying thank you. For a moment, Daniel's throat tightened. He took a tiny bite, then returned the rest to her. The girl giggled, running back to her mother. The woman said nothing, but her eyes softened, just for a heartbeat. That was the first crack in the wall she had built. Days passed, and Daniel noticed more. When the mother walked, she limped slightly, as if an old wound still pained her. Her clothes were patched again and again, the fabric worn thin. She used her own scarf to wrap her daughter at night, leaving herself in the cold. Everything about her screamed sacrifice. She had nothing, but she gave everything for the child. Daniel thought about speaking to her in his own language, but he was afraid his words would push her away. Instead, he began to show small gestures. Once, he brought a blanket hidden in his bag. When he placed it down, the mother froze, staring at it. As if it were poison, she did not touch it at first, but when the night grew bitter, Daniel saw the blanket wrapped around the girl's shoulders. It made him smile, even though she had refused to admit it. Still, danger grew closer. The city guards had started searching abandoned areas. There were whispers of illegal outsiders hiding near the port. Daniel knew if they were caught, the mother and child would be taken away. That fear was written on the woman's face every time footsteps echoed nearby. She held her daughter tighter, her eyes darting like a cornered animal. One night, when Daniel placed the food, she suddenly grabbed his wrist. Her grip was strong, desperate. She looked into his eyes, speaking in broken words. "Why, you? Why help? Human, not friend. Why?" Daniel froze. He wanted to answer, but words felt heavy. Finally, he whispered, "Because no one else will." The woman stared at him, her face unreadable. Then she let go, pulling her daughter back into her arms. Daniel walked away, his heart beating fast. He knew the risk was rising, but he also knew something important. She had finally spoken to him not as an enemy but as a person. Her secret was no longer only hers. Now it was shared with him. Tied. Between their silences, and as the stars shone faintly over the ruined city, Daniel realized this was no longer just about food. It was about trust, about survival, and about the fragile thread connecting a human man, an alien widow, and her daughter. The night was darker than usual. Heavy clouds covered the stars, and the broken lights of the spaceport barely glowed. Daniel walked carefully, the bag of food hidden under his coat. Something in the air felt different, uneasy, tense. He had learned to trust his instincts, and tonight they whispered danger. As he reached the familiar corner, he saw them. The alien mother and her daughter were huddled together as always, but the woman's face was more alert than before, her eyes scanning the shadows. The little girl clung to her, sensing her fear. Daniel crouched down, placing the food on the ground. He gave his usual nod, ready to leave, but then movement caught his eye. Shapes in the darkness creeping closer. 3 men stepped out from behind the cargo containers, their eyes hungry, their clothes ragged. Scavengers, men who lived off stealing, men who preyed on the weak. They had seen the food, and worse, they had seen the mother and child. Well, well, one of them sneered, his voice low and cruel. What do we have here? A widow and her brat, hiding where they don't belong. The mother stood quickly, pulling her daughter behind her. Her eyes blazed with fear, but also with a fierce will to protect. The scavengers laughed, circling closer. One of them kicked the bag of food aside, spilling its contents on the wet ground. The little girl whimpered, and the sound only made them grin wider. Daniel's chest tightened. He wanted to step back, to walk away, but his feet would not move. He could not leave them, not now. He stepped between the scavengers and the mother, raising his hands. Leave them, Daniel said firmly. The men laughed. And who are you, human? Their savior, their hero? One of them shoved him hard, but Daniel did not fall. He stood his ground, his jaw tight. The mother's eyes widened. For the first time she saw the man, not just as a silent giver of food, but as a shield. Her grip on her daughter tightened. The child's small voice whispered something, pleading, afraid. The scavengers moved closer, one pulling out a rusted blade. Daniel's heart pounded, but he refused to step aside. He had no weapon, no armor, nothing but his bare hands. Yet something inside him flared, a stubborn human courage that no war, no fear could crush. When the man lunged forward, Daniel caught, his wrist twisting sharply. The blade clattered to the ground, the scavenger howled in pain, stumbling back. The other 2 rushed in, fists swinging. Daniel took a hit to his shoulder, but he pushed forward, driving his elbow into one man's stomach. It was messy, desperate, and raw. He was outnumbered, but he fought with everything he had. Every strike, every block was not for himself. It was for them, for the mother watching with wide eyes, for the child clinging to her dress. The fight lasted only moments, but it felt like forever. Finally, the scavengers cursed and retreated. Into the shadows, one spat on the ground, shouting, "This isn't over, human!" Then they were gone, swallowed by the dark. Daniel stood breathing hard, his body aching, his knuckles bleeding. He turned slowly, meeting the mother's gaze. She stared at him, her face pale, her eyes filled with shock. Her daughter peeked from behind her, eyes round with awe. Daniel bent down, picking up the spilled food. He placed it back in the bag and set it gently near them. Then he gave his usual nod as if nothing had happened, and turned to leave. But the mother's voice stopped, him soft, trembling, broken yet clear. "Why?" she whispered, her accent heavy, her words uncertain. "Why fight? Why risk for us?" Daniel paused, his back still to her. He did not have the right words. He only said, "Because someone should." Then he walked away into the night. Behind him, the little girl tugged at her mother's arm. She whispered something, and for the first time the woman did not stop her. The child waved at Daniel's back, her small hand glowing in the faint light. That night, the mother sat in silence, holding her daughter close. Her heart was torn between fear and something new: trust. This human had risked his life for them, without asking for anything. No human she had ever met had done such a thing. She looked at the bag of food, then at her sleeping daughter, and for the first time in a long while she felt a small flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they were not alone anymore. As for Daniel, he walked home with aching muscles and bleeding hands, but his heart was strangely calm. He knew the danger would come again, yet he also knew this night had changed everything. He was no longer just the man who brought food. He was now their protector, whether they accepted it or not. And in the shadows of the ruined city, a fragile bond grew stronger, forged not by words but by courage and sacrifice, the kind of bond that could never be broken easily. After the night of the attack, everything was different. The alien mother no longer looked at Daniel with only suspicion. Her eyes still held caution, but they also carried something else: recognition. He was not just a stranger with food anymore. He was the man who had stood between her and danger. The little girl changed even faster. She no longer hid behind her mother. When Daniel arrived with food, she would run forward, her small feet splashing in puddles. Her laugh was soft, but it carried warmth through the cold streets. She began to show him things, tiny treasures she had found, like a shiny button or a piece of colored glass. Daniel always bent down, smiling as if each one was the most valuable gem in the galaxy. One evening, Daniel brought something different. Instead of just food, he carried a small ball, patched but still round. He rolled it gently toward the girl, and her eyes widened with delight. She picked it up and threw it back, her laugh echoing through the ruined spaceport. For the first time, laughter replaced fear. The mother watched, silent and stiff. Her hands held tightly together, her eyes full of conflict. She did not stop her daughter, but she did not join either. Her heart was torn, grateful for her child's joy, yet afraid of what it meant to trust. Daniel came every day, and slowly, the bond grew. He began to show the girl simple games, clapping rhythms with his hands, making funny faces that made her giggle. Once, he even drew a little picture in the dirt, an earth flower, bright and simple. The girl copied him with her tiny hands, her alien symbols mixing with his human drawings. When Daniel looked up, he caught the mother watching with softer eyes. For a brief second, her lips curved into the smallest smile before she turned away. Still, the city was dangerous. Rumors spread like smoke. People whispered about a human, seen walking with food every night. Some said he was feeding animals. Others said he was helping criminals. Daniel ignored it. But deep inside, he knew eyes were watching. One evening, as Daniel placed the food down, the mother finally spoke more than a few words. Her voice was low, hesitant but steady. "You risk much," she said slowly, her accent heavy. He looked at her, waiting. She continued, "If they find us, they punish you too." Daniel nodded, his face calm. "I know," he said simply. The mother's eyes widened, shocked by his lack of fear. She whispered, "Why? Why keep coming?" Daniel thought for a moment, then answered, "Because your daughter deserves to smile." Silence followed, heavy but powerful. The mother lowered her eyes, holding her child close. For the first time, she did not push his kindness away. Her guard was still strong, but the wall was no longer unbreakable. As days passed, the girl grew healthier. Her cheeks filled out, her laughter brighter, her steps stronger. Daniel felt proud, as if watching a flower bloom in the middle of a wasteland. Sometimes he would sit a little longer, telling short human stories with simple gestures. The girl clapped and laughed, even if she did not understand every word. But the bond came with danger. One night, when Daniel was leaving, a neighbor stopped him. "You walk strange paths, Daniel," the man said suspiciously. Daniel forced a smile, making up an excuse about night work. But he knew the truth. Rumors were sharpening into suspicion. That same night, he walked faster, his heart uneasy. When he reached the corner, he found the mother already standing, her daughter in her arms. Her eyes were fierce, her voice urgent. "No, come," she said, struggling to find the words too. "Dangerous." Daniel shook his head. "I can't stop now," he replied. Her expression hardened, but he saw the fear behind it. She was not only afraid for herself, she was afraid for him too. The little girl reached for him, calling in her soft alien tongue. Her mother sighed, her shoulders heavy. She finally whispered, "You, good man, but world not good." Those words stayed with Daniel as he walked home that night. He knew she was right. The world was not kind. Yet he could not walk away. Every time he saw the girl's smile, he felt something stronger than fear. A purpose, a connection, a bond that was no longer just about food. One evening, as they played with the little ball again, Daniel noticed something. The mother was watching, but her face was softer now. When the ball rolled to her feet, she bent down and picked it up for a long moment. She held it in her hands. Then slowly she rolled it back toward Daniel. It was a small gesture, but it was everything. A sign that the wall between them was finally cracking. That trust, fragile and rare, was beginning to grow. But even as hope bloomed, shadows moved closer. The guards were asking more questions, searching deeper in the abandoned places. It was only a matter of time before someone told them the truth. Daniel knew it. The mother knew it. And yet, every night, he still came because the bond between them was stronger than fear. And in that bond, a new story was quietly being written. A story not of war or hate, but of trust, love, and fragile hope. The days grew heavier. Whispers in the city spread like poison. The guards began moving through the streets at night, searching, asking questions. Daniel noticed the tension in every corner. Doors closed. Faster, eyes followed him longer. People had begun to wonder why he always carried food, why he always walked toward the ruined spaceport. One evening, as Daniel approached with his usual bag, he saw the mother waiting in the shadows. Her daughter was asleep in her arms, wrapped tightly in the blanket he had given them. Her face was harder than usual, her eyes full of urgency. When Daniel set the bag down, she did not reach for it. Instead, she shook her head and whispered, "No more, no, come again." Daniel froze. For the first time, she was not just cautious, she was desperate. "You must leave," she said in broken human words. "Guards. Searching. Dangerous." Her hands trembled, but her voice carried steel. She was ready to cut him off to protect him. Daniel's heart twisted. He knew she was right, but he also knew what it would mean for them. If he walked away now, they would starve. If he left them alone, they would be hunted. He looked at the girl's sleeping face, peaceful yet fragile, and shook his head slowly. "I can't stop," he whispered, his voice steady. The mother's eyes flashed with anger. "You fool," she hissed. "They kill us. They kill you." Her words cut deep, but Daniel did not move. For weeks he had carried food, stood guard, fought scavengers. He could not turn his back now, not after everything. The silence stretched, heavy as stone. Finally, the mother sank. To the ground, her daughter still in her arms, tears shone in her eyes, but she quickly wiped them away. She hated showing weakness, even to him. Her voice broke as she whispered, "Why? Why suffer with us?" Daniel crouched down, keeping his distance. He looked at her, really looked at her. This woman had lost her husband, lost her home, and yet she still fought every day for her child. She had nothing, yet gave everything, and he realized he could no longer pretend. This was not just kindness anymore, it was something deeper, heavier, something pulling him toward them. He spoke slowly so she could understand, "Because you shouldn't carry this alone." Her eyes widened, her lips parting in shock. No one had ever said that to her before, not even her own people. At that moment, footsteps echoed in the distance. Voices heavy with authority carried through the night. The guards, the mother's body stiffened, her arms wrapping protectively around her daughter. Her eyes darted wildly, searching for escape. Daniel acted fast. He pushed the bag of food toward her and motioned for silence. Then he stepped into the open street, walking calmly. When the guards turned the corner, they saw only him. "Out late again, Daniel?" One of them sneered. Daniel forced a tired smile. "Night shift," he muttered, lifting his empty hands. The guards studied him, suspicion sharp in their eyes. Finally, they moved on, their boots echoing against the stone. Daniel waited until they were gone before slipping back into the shadows. The mother's breathing was ragged, her daughter clutching at her neck. She looked at him with wide, trembling eyes. For the first time, her walls broke completely. She whispered, "You risk life. For us." Daniel nodded once. Every time. The mother closed her eyes, pressing her forehead against her daughter's hair. When she opened them again, she stared at Daniel with a mixture of fear and something else. Trust, maybe even hope, but her next words left him stunned. "We cannot stay," she said firmly. "We run. Before caught." Daniel knew she was right. The city was no longer safe. Sooner or later the guards would find them. But as she stood to leave, preparing to vanish into the night, Daniel's voice stopped her. "Wait," he said, his voice strong. The mother turned, confusion flashing across her face. Daniel took a deep breath, his chest tight. Then he spoke the words that changed everything. "Come live with me." The silence that followed was thick. The mother's eyes widened, her body stiffening. She looked at him as if he had spoken madness. Her daughter blinked sleepily, staring between them. The mother's voice shook with disbelief. "You..." "No, mean that." But Daniel's face was steady, his voice calm. "I do," he said. "You can't keep running. My home is small, but safe. Stay with me." The mother trembled, her lips pressed tight. She wanted to refuse, wanted to protect him by keeping her distance, but her daughter, half asleep, reached a small hand toward Daniel, and in that moment the woman's heart cracked. Fear still burned in her eyes, but so did something else, something fragile, something dangerous. Hope. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a life not of running but of safety, not of hunger but of family. Daniel's words hung in the air like a promise. The breaking point had come. From here, there was no going back. The words hung in the cold night air like thunder. "Come live with me," Daniel had said. The alien mother stared at him as if he had lost his mind. Her chest rose and fell quickly, torn between fear and something she did not dare name. The little girl, half asleep in her mother's arms, lifted her tiny hand toward him again. That small gesture cut through all the silence. The mother's lips trembled. "You no understand," she whispered in broken human words. "We bring danger, not peace. Guards hunt us. Neighbors hate us." Her voice was sharp, but her eyes carried pain. She was not rejecting his kindness. She was protecting him. But Daniel did not step back. "I know," he said calmly. "And still, I want you safe." The little girl stirred, blinking up at Daniel with sleepy eyes. She whispered something soft in her alien tongue, tugging at her mother's sleeve. Daniel did not understand the words, but he understood the meaning. She wanted to stay. The mother turned her face away, tears shining in her eyes. For years she had carried everything alone. Loss, hunger, fear, the endless weight of survival. Now here was a human man offering to share it. Her pride told her to refuse. Her fear told her to run. But her heart, tired and fragile, whispered something different. Daniel reached out, not touching her, but letting his hand hover in the air. A silent promise. "You don't have to fight alone anymore," he said quietly. The mother's shoulders shook. She looked down at her daughter, then back at Daniel. Finally, after what felt like forever, she gave the smallest nod. Her voice cracked, but the word escaped her lips. Yes. Daniel let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. He motioned for them to follow, and together they walked through the dark streets. Every step felt heavy with risk. The guards could appear at any corner. A neighbor could ask questions. But with each step, the bond between them grew stronger. At last they reached Daniel's home, a small and simple place at the edge of the district. It was nothing grand, just 2 rooms, a narrow kitchen, and walls worn with time. But compared to the cold streets, it was warmth. It was safety. The mother stood frozen at the doorway, her daughter clutching her hand. She whispered in disbelief, "This, your home?" Daniel nodded. "Ours now." The little girl ran inside first, her laughter filling the quiet house. She touched everything, the table, the chair, the blanket folded neatly on the bed. To her, it was a palace. The mother followed slowly, her steps hesitant, her eyes scanning every corner. She had not been in a real home since the war took everything from her. Daniel placed food on the table, simple bread and soup. The girl climbed into a chair eagerly, her face glowing with joy. Her mother sat stiffly at first, unsure if she belonged. But when her daughter handed her a piece of bread with a wide smile, she finally allowed herself to eat. It was the first meal in years that did not taste like fear. That night, Daniel gave them his own bed. He spread a blanket on the floor for himself. The mother protested in broken words, but he only smiled. "You've slept in the cold too long," he said. "Tonight you rest." She stared at him, torn. Between gratitude and disbelief, her daughter curled up on the bed, fast asleep, her small hands clutching the pillow. The mother sat beside her, watching the human man who had given them more than food. He had given them a chance at life. The days that followed were not easy. They lived quietly, careful of every sound. Daniel taught the girl simple human words. Water, bread, light. She repeated them proudly, her laughter echoing through the small house. Sometimes he taught her earth games, and her mother watched silently, her eyes softening with every smile. But danger was never far. Neighbors noticed the shadows at Daniel's window, whispers growing again. The mother warned him, "If they know, they take her. Take me." Her fear was real, but Daniel's resolve was stronger. "Then let them try," he said firmly. "I will not let them." One evening, when the girl was asleep, the mother finally spoke the words she had carried for so long. Her voice shook, but her eyes did not leave his. "You save us, Tini. Why? You could live free, safe, alone. Why carry our pain?" Daniel sat in silence for a long time before answering. "Because no one saved me once, when I needed it," he said, softly, "and I swore, if I ever had the chance, I would not walk away from someone else." The mother's breath caught. For the first time, she saw the loneliness behind his kindness. Not pity, not charity, understanding. Her hand trembled as she placed it gently on her daughter's hair, then looked back at him. Her voice was almost a whisper. "Then, we carry together." In that moment, the wall between them finally fell. They were no longer just a human man and an alien widow with her child. They were something more. Something fragile, but unbreakable. A family. And as the night wrapped around the small house, Daniel looked at them, mother and daughter safe under his roof. He knew danger would still come. He knew the world outside was still cruel. But for the first time in a long while, he felt peace. Because now, he was not alone. And neither were they.